Yo, hey guys, it's me, Fusion What Ifs, and today we're doing What If Deku was Error Sans or had his abilities. So, yep, I'm not sure how long this video is going to be in all honesty. It's going to be a one shot, so I'm probably going to end it off at like the, at the end of the entrance exam in all honesty. But, yeah, I really hope y'all enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe to hit 2K before May 21st. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Not really much else to say. The What If Asta Was Going to Reincarnation Part 2 is coming out very soon, so watch out for that. And check out my community tab, as you should. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Without further ado, play my intro. I know, let's get straight into it. Pretty much, actually, first off, on a side note, I don't know a whole lot about Error Sans, but I'm pretty sure I've done enough research to do this what if somewhat accurately. So, yeah. Pretty much, we would have a 4-year-old Izuku who had just recently gotten his dreams crushed. And I mean total, right? And the point to the quirk doctor still being informed quirkless. And he would not really process this, right? He'd be watching All Might's debut, and his mom would eventually walk him on him crying. And he would say, "Can I be a hero like that too?" And, his mom could only say, "I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry." Now, this wouldn't lift Izuku's spirits, because he knows what his mother meant by this, right? It's not that she didn't believe in him, it's just that she wanted to keep him safe, and that without a quirk, people becoming heroes were pretty much non-existent. So he could only really hope. The next day, I ended up going to, his school like he usually does, and this is when he would end up being bullied by Bakugo again, right? So we would time skip, I'm gonna say like a week or so, and Izuku was not feeling any better, right? He come to terms that he was quirkless, but that didn't make his school life any better. This is when suddenly a portal would open in front of him, right? This would just be a black portal, pitch black, and there would seem to just be nothingness as he stared at the portal, right? But he felt as if it was calling to him, as if he had no other choice. He felt curious and he felt drawn towards the portal, so he walked in, and as he did, this is when he realized that he made a big mistake. This is the biggest mistake of his life. The portal would close behind him, and he would now be stuck in a void, and this is pretty much my interpretation of the anti-void, I guess. And in here, he would realize that he would just be floating in this black mass of space, and as he moved forward, it just seemed as if he was in the exact same place he started, and it was causing him to sort of lose his mind, as eventually 2 years would go by, and Izuku would just barely be holding on to his sanity. Now his previously green hair would not end up being completely pure black, and his formerly green eyes are now completely red. At this point, he had been sort of experimenting with something he didn't realize he had, right? He realized that he has this sort of power, he just couldn't activate it yet. And as he tried harder, it would eventually activate, as he would glow this, as I'm gonna say, he would glow this red color, and he would be outside of the anti-void. Here, he would have ended up being sent to an AU. I'm gonna say this is gonna be one of the villain AUs, right? And Izuku, keep in mind, is 6 at this point, right? So he wouldn't even really know what an AU is, and he would just, for you guys who don't know what an AU is, an AU stands for alternate reality, or sorry, alternate universe, right? So he wouldn't even know what an AU is to begin with, right? So he would just be going around thinking he finally made it back home, and he could finally see his mom, right? Because that's something that helped him keep his sanity, to be able to see his mom again and to be able to see his family again. But this is when he had realized that he's not Hope, right? Apparently, in this universe, Inko Midoriya was actually dead, and there was another him. But it wouldn't be the same sort of him, right? It would be a him before the whole, anti-boy whatever, right? Except this one seemed to have a darker glint in his eyes. This one seemed to be somewhat ruthless, and this one was also older, right? This Izuku would actually end up being like 15, right? So Izuku would end up being a bit confused, thinking, why does they have like another one of him that's so tall, like his older brother and all of that? Until he'd end up realizing that this can't be, because he has the exact same name, right? So obviously he ended up doing a bit of research and find out that he was probably in something called an AU, which is an alternate universe. Now he'd end up going to school like any normal kid under a false alias. I must say like Izuna Mikoto or some shit like that. Yeah, something like that. And this is when he ended up getting bullied, right? Because Izuku's only grasped at the AU jump, which was his alternate universe jump, which allowed him to go through alternate universes, right? But besides that, I didn't really unlock any of his other powers, and he was bullied for it severely. In this one, it was a much darker than the regular universe that he came from, and quirkless people were seen as useless. And he couldn't prove that he had AU jumps, since if he did, he didn't know if he was able to come back here, right? And his AU jump was yearly thing, right? So it had a year cooldown. Because of this, he would end up being bullied for a while, and eventually he would turn 7, and he would AU jump again. After doing this, end up in another villain AU, right? And this would happen about, I'm gonna say, 4 more times, right? And he would now be like 11, I think, right? Because he turned 7 plus 4, yeah, it would not be 11, right? And he would realize that no matter what AUs he ended up landing, bad ones, right? And for the first time, it ended up landing, a hero AU, right? This being another universe where in this one they were actually a lot kinder, right? But at this point, he didn't trust anybody, because throughout all his AU jumping in all other universes, he could only really, he picked up one important lesson, right? This being that the only person you can ever fully trust is yourself. And because of this, he ended up developing a sort of fear, I'm gonna say. Well, not really fear, but he didn't really trust anyone else, to the point that he actually developed, I'm not sure how you say it, but I'm pretty sure it's like aphophobia. Yeah, aphophobia, which is the fear of being touched, right? Just because of this, he didn't really trust anyone else, because he had been hurt so many times. And he had now started to sort of realize or materialize some of his other powers. The first one he would realize would be the blue strings. These blue strings allowed him to shatter somebody's soul and even take control of their body by implanting his soul into them, right? Now, he had only really mastered this power when he turned 14, and this is when he would have also finally AU jumped to another AU, right? With a set goal in mind, which was to get back to his own original universe. Now, listen, okay? He would end up going to another AU, which I'm gonna say is another hero AU. But this time, because of the amount of times he ended up using his AU jump, the cooldown went from about a year to like every 4 months, right? So he would end up spending 4 months in a bunch of other AUs, and would have also materialized another power. This being the air blasters. I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. It would just be a bigger gacha blaster that was black in color, had red eyes, and seemed to have this sort of blue tears flowing down their face. Now, don't get it wrong, okay? These gacha blasters were bigger, faster, and a whole lot stronger. So you haven't really used them in times of crisis. Like, for example, in one AU when All For One attacked and he had no other choice, and these air blasters are strong enough to completely wipe out All For One with like damn near complete ease, right? But think in mind, this was a weakened All For One, right? So yeah, pretty much that's what would happen, and you would eventually be able to summon about 5 of these, right? Which is a considerable amount since they are pretty strong. Now he would finally be 16, and he finally landed in the right universe, his original universe, and he would immediately just be tired. He would be exhausted, right? From all the fighting, from all the jumping, all the universe jumping, and just everything. He would just end up being exhausted. Now he would move. I'm not sure to say it, but he would actually just walk around, just taking the scenery, right? this felt familiar to him. This felt like his own universe, and that's how he realized that this was his own universe. Immediately, he would end up going to the park that he did as kids, and this is when he would actually end up sitting down, just taking in the fresh air. First, he would end up seeing this one girl who had actually always came to this park, right? A girl with shoulder-length black hair, a bob cut, or a bob-shaped cut, and she would have decently fair skin, a somewhat athletic build, and cerulean eyes. This would be Yui Koda. I'm pretty sure that would be her name. And if you guys know who this is, she is a student from class 1B, right? So anyways, he would end up going, swallowing the bit of fear he kind of had. He would end up walking up to Yui and asking her if she knew where this was. And actually ended up being his old apartment that he remembered, right? So she would obviously say yes, and she would start to lead him there. While leading him there, they would eventually start walking, and this is when it would start to happen. He would start glitching. Throughout these 12 years that he was AU jumping, he would realize that he just seemed to, when he just happened to, when he developed this power, he also developed to start glitching, right? It was almost as if he was flickering in and out of reality, and as he does, multiple error words would start to appear around him, as if to say that he wasn't supposed to be here, he wasn't supposed to exist, right? And when this happened, his skin would usually turn a very dark black, and his eyes would also, the whites in his eyes would turn red, and he would seem to have blue like tears flowing from his eyes, right? But they weren't the natural color, they were like pure blue, right? As he would be struggling to get up in such immense pain, right? Now obviously this wasn't the first time it happened, and in all honesty he was sort of pissed off that it happened now, because he just found someone who was able to give him directions, and everyone also had seen him glitching dumped him immediately. Like, they wouldn't stay around him for any longer. They were scared. They didn't know what to think, right? But this is when he would stop glitching and eventually look up to expect to see nobody. But then he would end up seeing Yui. Yui would then help him onto a bench and ask if he was okay. And through her emotionless face, he would end up seeing a slight bit of worry, right? It wasn't anything too serious since they just met, but it was something enough that reaffirmed in his heart that she was strangely kind, right? So obviously he said it was fine and that this was something that his quirk just had him doing, right? Which is what he would say, right? He would have his quirk put in as glitch, right? So yeah. But anyways, he would just tell her that if she could just help him get to this place, he would mean the world to him, right? So she'd end up taking him there, and they would end up taking, separate routes, right? As she finally got to the place, he would knock on the door, and there he would see Inko. Now listen, okay? If there's any other person, they might not recognize him, but a mother knows her child. So as Inko looked at Izuku, she just ended up bursting into tears as she say, "Izuku, is that you?" And Izuku, who was actually sort of surprised that she remembered him, was happy because this meant that this was probably his AU, his universe, right? This isn't just something else that reaffirmed that this was his universe, right? So he would walk forward and he would say, "Yeah, I'm here, Mom." And, they're hugging out, the Midoriya tears, Midoriya tears just flowing, and end up walking inside. Now immediately Inko would have a bunch of emotions just going through her, worried, relief, sort of proud, because the proud part being that Izuku seemed to have grown up well, right? He had a sort of swimmer build, an athletic swimmer build, and he was decently tall, and he wasn't lacking in looks, right? So obviously she was sort of proud of him, but more of she was happy, right, to finally be able to see her son again, her only child. Now she wasn't too depressed during the time that he was gone, because even though he was her only child, she realized that she had to keep on living for him too, right? Just in case one day he came back and he was found. She never lost that slight hope that they would find him. So yeah, that's what would happen. He'd end up going back home and he'd end up explaining to Inko what would happen, and Inko would actually believe him, every single word of it. She would believe that he would be able to jump jump through universes, and that he would also have these other powers, right? Which he would demonstrate to her. Now she would ask him what he wants to do, and he's equally wants to become a hero, right? Now he wouldn't be a Naruto hero, right? He'd be sort of an anti-hero because Zuko throughout these days has grown colder, right? He wasn't the same happy person he was when he first was in this universe. No. He would now be a lot darker. So he would end up saying to his mom wants to become a hero, but not only to put his mom in people's face, but just to keep people safe, right? In a sort of, cold tone. And this one, Inko would just nod her head, and she would end up saying that she would have him enrolled in a sort of middle school, right? So that he could finally learn a bit and be able to apply for UA. Now, should end up doing such, and she would end up applying to Aldera High, the same one which Baka would end up going to, right? So, he would go to Aldera High, tell his teacher that that's where he's supposed to be and all that. And then this is when the teacher would introduce him to the class, right? He would walk and introduce himself as Izuku Midoriya and say his quirk was glitch. Now people would be a bit interested in what the specifics of his quirk were, but then we'd also have Baka back to the class. He'd be like, is that Izuku? He would be a bit confused, right? Because Izuku was missing for the last 12 years, right? 12 years is no short amount of time. No. So he'd been missing for the last 12 years, and he just couldn't believe it. He was back. Why was his hair different? Why was his eyes different? And he had this different sort of aura, right? He had this aura of someone who was a trained veteran in fighting, someone who was not afraid to get his hands dirty, which he did do a few times since he did go into a bunch of villain AUs, right? So, anyways, he ended up taking a seat, and this is when eventually lunch would hit, and he would end up being remembered by Bago saying, "Where were you? You were gone for 12 years. You don't just get to come back here and act as if nothing happened." And this is when Izuku would just end up looking at Bakugo, right? Now, Izuku, normally, right, the look he gave Bakugo was something that put fear in Bakugo. He wasn't expecting the shy Izuku who didn't really talk back to him to give him such a glare, to give him something that would put the fear in him, right? Something that even his mother couldn't do. So Izuku would just end up looking at him and would say, "Why do you care?" And this is really the only words he would have to say to Bakugo, as Bakugo would immediately just sit back down in his seat, sort of frightened, right? And Izuku would just go back to doing his work. He wouldn't interact with any of the students in there, and he would just end up living his best life. End up going to the same park that he did when he met Yui, and he ended up meeting her again, right? This time they would actually exchange names and all of that, and Izuku would sort of help her train her quirk, right? They would end up talking a bit, meeting a few more times, and eventually Izuku would end up getting her phone number because he finally got a phone, and yeah, they just end up, connecting through that. They would be pretty solid friends, and she pretty much be she pretty much be his only friend right now, right? Because he didn't really trust anybody else except Yui, and that was just slightly because she didn't run away from him when he was glitching out, right? Which was a major thing that most people would do, but she didn't, right? So he felt that he could somewhat trust her. Because of this, he would be perfectly fine with, being around her, but touch was still out of the question, right? So whenever she would ever tap Izuku's shoulder, he would always end up just instinctually dodging because, he just had that phobia. He didn't like being touched, and he still didn't trust anyone all that much, but he would be fine with it, right? So now we have the 10 months time skip, right? Out of these 10 months time skip, they met up a few more times. Izuku would end up helping her train her quirk, and he would also end up joining a sort of mercenary group, right? This would be a sort of way to earn money because he realizes that, even though he still is a child, he still needs to earn money to, pay rent and, help his mom out and all of that, right? So he'd end up doing that and end up making, a few $100,000, I guess. I'm talking US dollars, right? If you convert it to yuan and all of that. But I mean converting it to US dollars, I mean a few $100,000. And that's because people in this day and age, well not this day and age, but people in that day and age, right? They really had people that they hated. And because quirks were so out there, having to kill somebody was generally harder, right? Especially if they had a strong quirk. So he ended up taking mercenary quests for people who had strong quirks, which gave, you know, a higher bounty, I guess, and eventually ended up being known as Blue String, I guess, or just actually no, it ended up being known as Error. Yeah, Error. That's pretty much the name he would go by, and he'd end up being a assassin or / mercenary, right? Which is how he'd earn his money. But anyways, right, 10 months would pass. He ended up applying to UA High School. Such an incident would still happen, except in this one, Izuku would just take care of him pretty easily. One Gotcha Blaster, done. He wouldn't be dead by any means because Izuku held back a lot, but yeah, he would be knocked out properly. Ended up meeting All Might and getting out his autograph. Then he immediately went to go meet, you know, Yui again, right? Now at this point in time, his and Yui's relationship with Mutsushi to the point that Izuku allowed her to touch him, right? And pause, I don't mean it like that, okay? But yeah, he would allow her to make physical contact with him because she was someone that he felt that he could trust a lot, right? Like not as much as he could trust his mother, but quite a lot, right? That's nothing much, right? Izuku did let you know, his mom, you know, touch him and all that. Pause, not in that sort of fashion, but yeah, like make physical contact with him, right? Because she was his mother and he did trust his mother quite a lot. Now, UA entrance exam, right? He would walk in, sit beside Yui this time, and he would ace the we'd end up acing the what's it called? The written exam with complete ease. Practical exam would pull up, and he would actually be wearing the same tracks that they did in canon, except the tracks would actually end up being black, where the parts were green, and the whites would end up just being gray. Now, this is when Prism would say go go go, and everyone would rush in through. This is when Izuku would end up just using his blue strings and Gotcha Blaster to pretty much just rack up about 220 points. Yeah, his control was that good. And with all the robots just sort of seeming to just line up in like perfectly straight lines for his Gotcha Blaster to just shoot at them, it was pretty easy, right? 220 points with complete ease, right? As I saw this, he saw potential and he wanted him in his class. Period. Now we had the Zero Pointer, right? Now I'm gonna say for plot reasons, Yui was gonna be in like the same whatever place, right? So she ended up getting a few points, enough to put her in class 1A this time actually, and this is when she ended up being trapped under Rebel, and the Zero Pointer ended up coming towards her, right? Izuku would pull out his Gotcha Blaster and shoot it directly in the head, having it fall down, and then he would end up using the blue strings to take off all the rubble, and then he would end up grabbing Yui and taking her away to get her healed from Recovery Girl, right? From there on out, they would end up getting healed. Izuku would end up taking her home, and while she was at her doorstep, she would turn back to look at Izuku in the eyes, giving, you know, a small peck on the cheeks before walking through her door, right? Now Izuku was sort of hyped by this. He was like, you know, internally, right, he was stunned, he was blushing, and his heart would be racing, right? And his mind would say, let's go! As you know, he finally bagged the girl he wanted, right? Because I'm gonna say he does like Yui, right? End up going back home, eating his favorite katsudon. And that's how I'm gonna end it off, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed this one shot. Honestly, I enjoyed making this, surprisingly. I thought I wouldn't like it since I am like a big Undertale fan, but not like alternate universes, right? I know the original Undertale storyline, but not any of the other ones. So researching about the Error Tale was a bit hard, but it was still fun nonetheless. Making this What If was fun. And yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed this. This was What If Deku was Error Santa's has his abilities one shot. And that's it. Hope y'all enjoyed. Stay cold, stay frosted. Peace.